Okay, hi everyone. Very good evening and welcome back to CrackGradeB. So today we'll be doing the revision of accounting standards, the important accounting standards we have picked up, right? So throughout this particular lecture, just focus on to the principles. Very good evening. Focus on to the principles which are being told, right? And the basics remain the same. So yeah, just a second, please. Let's start. So we have accounting standard 10, property, plant and equipment. In this particular accounting standard, we'll also be talking about the methods of depreciation that has been provided over here, right? So AS10, and I hope that this is particularly visible to you. It helps us to know that at what value we should represent our financial statements at. ठीक है, किस value पे हमें अपने financial statements represent करने चाहिए. Now, what are the questions that this particular accounting standard tends to answer? This will be recognition. What should be the carrying amount of the asset in your books, right? And determining the depreciation charges as well as the impairment loss. There has been question on to the impairment losses as well, right? Impairment losses का depreciation का मतलब तो हमें पता है that it is normal wear and tear. But what do we mean by impairment is, suppose I have this particular pen and in my books I have written this pen at 10,000 rupees. मैंने इस पेन की वैल्यू अपनी बुक्स में 10,000 रुपए रखी हुई है. But in market, this particular pen can only fetch me 5,000 rupees. 5,000 रुपए ही की वैल्यू देगा मुझे, राइट? सो इफ देयर हैज बीन परमानेंट डिक्लाइन इनटू द वैल्यू ऑफ योर असेट, दैट इज कॉल्ड एज द इम्पेयरमेंट, ठीक है? एंड द एडजस्टमेंट फॉर दैट इज आल्सो समथिंग वी विल बी watching it over in this particular accounting standard. Now, application of accounting standard 10, it must be applied for the accounting of property, plant and equipment. Now, there are certain cases जहाँ पे आपका AS10 applicable नहीं होगा. Exception needs to be remembered by you. So, for example, your biological assets like the live animals or plants which are pertaining to the agricultural activity. Bearer plants, except the bearer plants, bearer plants को नहीं include किया गया है. It is used in the production or supply of agricultural produce anticipated to give produce for more than 12 months and has a remote chance of being sold. So, it is going to be there with you. Thus, AS10 applies to the bearer plant but is not applicable to the produce of bearer plants. This is in case of agriculture. Now, next is the wasting assets like the mineral rights, expenditure on the exploration of extraction, mineral oils, etc. These kind of licenses, we are not going to handle them under the AS10, that is property, plant and equipment. Now, what is the recognition of assets? Recognition का मतलब क्या होता है? When you should recognize the assets into your books. That means if I have purchased a particular machinery, should I represent that into my books or not? And if I am going to do that, when I should be doing it, right? So there are two conditions for this. You can recognize the asset into your books if the future economic benefits would come to you and the cost can be reliably measured. ठीक है, दो conditions आपको दी हुई है. If these two conditions are fulfilled, you can recognize the assets into your books. Also, items like the spare parts, standby equipments, servicing equipments, they are considered as PPE only when such items meet the criteria of PPE. If not, they will be items, they will be categorized under the inventory. For example, spare parts, ठीक है? If the spare part is a significant, holding a significant identity, right? Is having a separate identity of its own, number one. Number two, there is a separate significant cost allocable to such particular spare part. So remember that you have to quantify that spare part separately. आपको उसको अलग से recognize करना पड़ेगा. If that is not the case, then you are going to treat it as an inventory item. For example, बहुत सारे nuts and bolts होते हैं which we will be using in the machinery. Now, nuts and bolts, they do not have a separate identity. They do not give a significant identity to the machinery. They do not have a considerable value attached to themselves, and that is why we are going to treat them as item of inventory and we are not going to separately identify them. ठीक है, अगर मान लीजिए मेरे पास में 10 चीजें हैं, उन 10 चीजों की इतनी कोई significant value नहीं है. So what am I going to do? I am going to just take them to the inventory. Further, AS10 does not specify any unit of measure. Thus, accounting professionals need to use the proper judgment to recognize the property, plant and equipment. Now, like items like molds and dies, etc. they are not of wait. If they are not of material nature, they are aggregated and hence the criteria PPE will be applicable to such aggregate value. अब ये molds और dyes क्या होते हैं? For example, when we manufacture biscuits, you might have seen that biscuits have different kinds of shapes, different kinds of designs, etc. Right? All these items are used to manufacture the products of different nature. So आप उन सबको aggregate कर सकते हो and then you can classify them as an item of property, plant and equipment. Now hear me out. In case of property, plant and equipment, you do not have a unit of measurement. ठीक है, unit of measurement कैसे नहीं है? For example, when I am producing this particular pen, one pen is the unit of measurement for me. But in case of property, plant and equipment, this is left to the judgment of the accountant, right? अगर आपको ऐसा लगता है that this whole constitutes a identifiable machinery, it holds a considerable value, तब आप उसको separately identify करेंगे. Otherwise, you can treat the items as inventory also. So, unit of measurement is not clear. It is left to the judgment of the accountant. Fine. Now, how you are going to determine the cost? So, as per AS 10, the cost of property, plant and equipment may include initial cost as well as the subsequent cost. अब initial cost में आपका क्या क्या आएगा? देखो, initial cost में मतलब ये होता है, one thing I always explain that you have to include all the cost into the cost of machinery till the time the asset is ready to use. Doesn't matter आप असलियत में कब use कर रहे हैं. When it never concerns us that when you are going to actually use the machine, doesn't matter to us. If the asset is ready to use, अगर मान लीजिए 10 अप्रैल को on 10th of April the asset is ready to use, then all the cost which I have incurred till this particular place will be constituted into the cost of asset. उसको बोलते हैं capitalization of cost. Now there are certain things जैसे कि आपकी refundable duties हो गई. For example, if I have paid GST, अगर मैंने GST पे किया है, I'm going to get a credit of it. So that is not going to be my cost. ऐसी वो हर चीज जिसका मुझे benefit मिल जाएगा needs to be deducted from the cost of machinery. So there are two costs. Number one is initial cost and number two is the subsequent cost. Subsequent cost में क्या आ सकता है? Subsequent cost में आपका repairs and maintenance आ सकता है. Repairs and maintenance, sometimes we do incur money on the repairs and maintenance to maintain the present what you can say production capacity. अगर आप अपनी present production capacity को maintain करने के लिए if you are incurring any repair and maintenance, remember that is a revenue nature of expense and that should not be added to the मशीनरी कॉस्ट. डजंट मैटर आपने 6 लाख खर्चा किए, 7 लाख खर्चा किए, 8 लाख खर्चा किए, राइट? द क्वांटम ऑफ मनी डज नॉट मैटर टू अस. व्हाट मैटर्स इज व्हाट इज द इम्पैक्ट दैट अमाउंट इज ब्रिंगिंग ऑन द परफॉर्मेंस ऑफ मशीनरी. मशीनरी की परफॉर्मेंस में क्या फर्क आ रहा है? इफ यू आर एबल टू मेंटेन द सेम प्रोडक्शन लेवल, देयर इज नो इम्प्रूवमेंट दैट हैज हैपेंड एंड दैट सच काइंड ऑफ रिपेयर्स एंड मेंटेनेंस शुड बी टेकन टू द P&L account. But if you have incurred even an expense of 50,000 rupees repair and maintenance and it has led to increase in production capacity by 20,000 units, आपकी production capacity 20,000 units से बढ़ गई है, so in such case such kind of subsequent expenditure you have to take it to the cost of machinery. आपको वहां पे add कर देना है. So that is something. These are two things. Anyways, we are going to see this further on. Initial cost में आपका क्या क्या आएगा? So all such expenses which you have incurred to construct the machinery, ठीक है? अब वो चाहे कोई भी खर्चे हो, like selling and distribution, finance and accounting, personnel, right? Further, PPE may also includes the assets acquired for safety or environmental purposes. कभी कभी क्या होता है? You might have seen in the coal power plants, they have to install the environmental equipment so that these kind of harmful gases should be stopped going into the atmosphere, right? So such kind of what you can say catalyzers and other kinds of equipments, I am not able to recall the names of the equipment, but you have to install such kind of things so that your atmosphere is not much polluted. So such kind of equipments also will be included in the property, plant and equipment. Subsequent cost में क्या आएगा? While recording the items, the business entity does not include the cost incurred on day-to-day servicing. Such costs are taken to the P&L account because that is the expense you are having. The day-to-day cost includes labor, small parts as well as the consumables. Furthermore, the parts of few items categorized under PPE may need to be replaced. So such cost of replacing shall be included in the carrying amount. देखो अगर मान लीजिए I am operating a particular machinery and we have to incur our engine, the machinery's engine got disturbed and we have to replace that particular engine. अब हमें engine को replace करना पड़ेगा. So replacement cost of a particular part will be added into the carrying amount. ठीक है, वो आप add कर सकते हैं because there is a significant portion of the machinery part which you are replacing. So replacement cost को आप add कर सकते हैं. In addition to this, very condition to continue utilizing may be undertake regular inspections, right? So this is despite the fact that the parts of items are replaced or not. Therefore, once such inspection is undertaken, its cost is included in the carrying amount of item of PPE as a replacement cost only if the recognition criteria above is met. ठीक है? So कभी-कभी there are regular inspections that also happen for the item to check for any faults in such kind of item. So इस तरीके की कॉस्ट भी आपको देखना पड़ेगा. इफ दिस इज वन टाइम ऑफ कॉस्ट यू कैन एड इट इनटू द कॉस्ट ऑफ मशीनरी. ठीक है, रेगुलर इंस्पेक्शंस इन ऑर्डर टू चेक द फॉल्ट्स ऑफ पार्ट्स. नाउ नेक्स्ट इज द मेजरमेंट ऑफ कॉस्ट. सो हम किस तरीके से मेजर कर सकते हैं? द मॉडल चूजन, it is a matter of accounting policy. Number one, there are two models which are cost model as well as the revaluation model. ठीक है, आप कोई सा भी मॉडल फॉलो कर सकते हैं but you need to give a proper disclosure for that. And apart from that, accounting principle हमें क्या कहते हैं? We have read accounting principles and there is an accounting principle on cost, historical cost, and it says that you should record your assets on cost. But we do have a revaluation model as well. हमारे पास में revaluation model भी है और आप उसमें भी account for कर सकते हैं. अब cost और revaluation model के बीच में क्या difference होगा? Obviously, when we are following the cost model, we are going to ignore any kind of increase or decrease which happens into the value of machinery. ठीक है, वो हम ignore करेंगे because market value keeps on changing and that is something which should not interrupt us. Whereas when we talk about the revaluation model आपको कहता है that you should look out for the revaluation of the machinery. और अगर कोई revaluation होता है then these kind of machinery they will be represented at the revalued value. ठीक है, revalued cost पे वो represent की जाएंगी. So let us see these two models. Cost model सबसे पहले है हमारे पास में. So once an asset is recognized, that should be written into the books at cost less accumulated depreciation, less any impairment loss. Impairment loss in the beginning of the lecture I have explained you when you have recorded the asset suppose at 10,000 rupees and you know that your asset is not going to fetch this much value in the market. आपकी asset आपको इतना पैसा नहीं देने वाली है. There has been a permanent decline in the value of asset, so that brings you impairment loss, right? So वो भी आपको minus कर देना है. Now what will be cost model क्या कहता है? Obviously you have to record the asset at the acquisition cost, include all kinds of import duties and non-refundable duties. ठीक है, ऐसी कोई ड्यूटी for which you are going to receive the credit, जिसके लिए आपको क्रेडिट मिल रहा हो, don't include these because they are going to form your बेनिफिट. ठीक है, तो हमें सिर्फ अपनी कॉस्ट निकालनी है. नेक्स्ट, कॉस्ट डायरेक्टली एसोसिएटेड विद ब्रिंगिंग द एसेट टू द लोकेशन. फॉर एग्जांपल इंस्टॉलेशन रिलेटेड कॉस्ट, राइट? आपकी इंस्टॉलेशन रिलेटेड कॉस्ट हो गई, फ्रेट इनवर्ड की कॉस्ट हो गई, लोडिंग अनलोडिंग की कॉस्ट हो गई, राइट? ऑल सच कॉस्ट शुड बी इंक्लूडेड इनटू द value of machinery till the time asset is in the ready to use condition. जब तक कि आपकी asset ready to use condition में नहीं आ जाती, by that time all the cost incurred onto the asset is going to be included in the machinery's cost, right? Or the asset cost. Next is cost of dismantling, removing the item, restoring the site onto which the asset is included. This is very, very important. So if we know that in future ये dismantling वगैरह की cost होगी, right? And to restore the platform where this particular thing has been installed, so all such estimated cost also you include into the value of asset itself. कि आगे चल के ये cost लगने वाली है and we know that this cost is associated with the machinery, so let us just include it. So remember that examples are such kind of cost will be included, like preparing the site, initial delivery, handling cost, installation cost, any professional fees, remember that, employee benefit cost, cost of any testing. ठीक है, कई बार क्या होता है, suppose we have installed the machinery, now we have to run a trial test, right, trial run में you get to know that whether machinery is operating properly or not. If there is any kind of problem, you will get to know that. Fine. So this is why trial run is important, and any trial run related cost needs to be included into the value of asset. आपकी asset की value में वो चीज include हो जाएगी. Then we have revaluation model. So under the revaluation model, after the asset is recognized, the property, plant and equipment should be carried at revalued amount, provided the fair value can be reliably measured. अगर आप asset की fair value measure कर सकते हो, then you can go for the your revalued portion. Nahi, see that's what I told you. The question is that if I don't use the asset for a year and during that period I have done multiple maintenance, then would the maintenance cost be included in it? See, what did I tell you? Till the time you bring the asset into the ready to use condition. Once your asset, my asset was ready to use on 10th April, I did not use it till 30th November, doesn't matter. In 5-6 महीनों में whatever repairs and maintenance I have done will be taken to P&L account, not to the cost of asset, right? Because your asset was ready to use on 10th April itself. Now it is your fault why you haven't used it. If you haven't used it, all the kinds of repairs and maintenance will go into the P&L account. ठीक है, बस सब कुछ. It does not matter whether you have used it or not. अगर asset ready to use है, post that all the kinds of repairs and maintenance will go into the P&L account, not to the cost of asset. Now the revalued amount is nothing, just the fair value of the asset less any kind of depreciation and impairment losses. So these are the two methods that we have, cost method as well as a revaluation method. Whatever you are following, you need to disclose it, right? Now next thing that we bring on to the depreciation. Depreciation is a non-cash item. Number one thing, that is the nature of what you can say, such kind of expense. Apart from that, whenever we are purchasing any kind of asset, we are charging depreciation amount into the P&L account for two particular things. For example, हम हर साल depreciation को इसलिए भी इकट्ठा करते हैं, so that suppose after 10 years I have to replace this machinery, so I will be having funds with me. ठीक है, मेरे पास में funds होंगे इसको replace करने के लिए, and that is why every year I am having the saving through the P&L account, right? There are three methods of depreciation which are given in this particular accounting standard, and we are going to see those both all these three methods one by one. So as per IAS 10, depreciation is nothing but a charge which is allocated to an asset systematically over its useful life. However, this depreciable amount included in the carrying amount of any other asset. This is the case when future economic benefits from an asset are used to produce other assets. जैसे कि example देखो इसका, यहाँ पे हम क्या बोलना चाहते हैं, depreciation of a manufacturing plant and machinery will be included in the cost of conversion of inventory. Similarly, depreciation of PPE used for developmental activities will be included in cost of intangible asset. अब एक बात बताओ मुझे, I am using the machinery for the production of my inventories. ठीक है, so whenever somebody asks me that what is the cost of one pen, मैं एक machinery को use कर रही हूँ which I have imported from Germany, right? And that particular machinery I am utilizing for producing these kind of pens. Now if someone asks me that what is the cost of one pen, I should include the depreciation of machinery as well, because machinery I am using solely for the production of this pen, right? ठीक है, इसी पेन के लिए हम यूज कर रहे हैं, एंड दैट इज व्हाई वी विल बी इंक्लूडिंग इट ओवर हियर एज वेल. हम जो डेप्रिसिएशन मशीनरी का जो डेप्रिसिएशन वाला पोर्शन है, वी विल बी इंक्लूडेड इन द कॉस्ट ऑफ इन्वेंट्री एज वेल, because in order to produce this particular pen, all the expenses which I am incurring should be included, and that is when I'll get the true cost of this particular pen. Very good evening. So yeah, for example, even in you, if you are suppose you are developing COVID vaccine, ठीक है, सपोज यू आर डेवलपिंग कोविड वैक्सीन. अब अगर हम कोविड वैक्सीन डेवलप कर रहे हैं and I am utilizing a machinery for that, so the depreciation of that machinery should be included into the cost of COVID vaccine, which I'm going to charge from the customers. Yeah, sure. Anyways, let's see this. Every part of an item of PPE that has a cost which is material in respect of total cost should be depreciated separately. For example, इसका example यहाँ पे आपको दिया हुआ है. Airframes as well as the engines of aircraft will be depreciated separately because they have got a separate identity of their own. ठीक है, उनकी खुद की अपनी एक separate identity है. They have got a significant value attached to them, and that is why you are going to depreciate them separately. Because for example, I have there is a machinery, right, and that machinery has been made after combining 4 different components. Those 4 different components have got their significant value. They have got their different kind of lifespan. ठीक है, अगर हम एक कार की भी बात करें, एक कार के एग्जांपल में भी आप देखो, कार में बहुत सारे पार्ट्स लगे होते हैं, राइट, एंड दे all of them have their kind of different lifespan, but still हम क्या करते हैं, कार को तो एक total way में ही हम depreciate करते हैं. But in case of businesses, if you have got property, plant and equipment, for example, if you have got equipment, those have if they have separate components which have significant value attached to them, they have got significant different time frame, and apart from that they are easily identifiable separately, तब आपको क्या करना चाहिए, तब आपको उनको अलग से depreciate करना चाहिए, right? So the methods of depreciation, let us see that. First of all, period of charging. So useful life of the asset. Useful life is the time period for which the asset is estimated to be used. Anticipated usage of the asset in terms of its expected capacity. Probable wear and tear depending on the factors like repairs and maintenance, commercial or technical obsolescence. So these are the factors you will consider, and after that you will be able to find off ki theek hai, what is the useful life of the asset. Sometimes the manufacturer says that this particular component you should use for the 5-year period only. तब हमें उसके हिसाब से चलना है. Sometimes suppose I have purchased a particular component, but now the company has came up with a significant variation of this. ठीक है, कंपनी ने एक नया वेरिएशन इसका लॉन्च कर दिया है, because of which the older component stands it is not much useful for me. So technological obsolescence can also happen. So useful life is dependent on all these kind of factors. Apart from that, depreciation methods, sometimes you can have legal limit as well. जैसे कि example है, NGT ने in 2015 imposed a ban on all diesel vehicles which are operating in the Delhi NCR, which are older than 10 years. Now we have depreciation method. 3 depreciation method we'll be talking about. Number 1, we have the straight line method, WDV method, and then we also have the units of production method. So let us see that. So depreciation method which you are going to apply onto the asset must be checked at the end of each financial year. This is because there can be situations where the depreciation method being used no longer reflects the manner economic benefits are accruing. देखो क्या हो रहा है, if I am utilizing this particular asset every year, right, whatever manner in which I am utilizing it, so I have to take the cost as well into that particular year, and this comes from the matching principle. Matching principle हमें कहता है that revenues should be matched with the cost. ठीक है, all the revenues which we are incurring just to earn that particular cost up should be matched. ठीक है, so straight line method देखते हैं सबसे पहले. Straight line method is very simple. For example, cost of the asset is 5 lakh, residual value is 50,000, useful life is 10 years. So what will be the amount of depreciation? 5 lakh less residual value divided by 10. That means 45,000 each year I'll be charging to the depreciation. Very simple straight line method. यहाँ पे every year your depreciation amount is going to be same. हर साल आपका depreciation amount जो है वो same रहेगा, and at the end asset will have a value of 50,000 left. Next we have diminishing balance method, also called as the written down value method. ठीक है, written down value method, यहाँ पे हम एक fixed percentage charge करेंगे. जैसे कि for example, let's suppose The cost of the asset is 2 lakh rupees. Great. They have told me you have to charge depreciation 10%. So in the first year, what is the depreciation that I'll be charging? 20,000. ठीक है, 20,000 I'll be charging. So 2 lakhs less 20,000. ये 2 lakhs है. 2 lakhs less 20,000. Now written down value is 1,80,000. That means my asset will be represented at 1,80,000. Now in the next year, depreciation will be charged on 1,80,000 and it will come at 18,000. So you know that in this particular method, asset value will never be zero. In case of SLM method, asset की value zero हो सकती है, but in case of written down value method, your asset is never going to be zero. कभी भी आपकी asset जो है वो zero नहीं होगी. This year I am charging 18,000. Next year I'll be charging, let's say, 16,000. उसके बाद में 14,000. So in a way, as assets value will decrease, the depreciation amount will also be decreased, right? So that is what that is why we call it as written down value method. इसलिए हम इसको written down value method कहते हैं. Next we have the units of production method. So under this, depreciation charge is estimated on the basis of number of units which are produced by the asset. Now when this kind of method will be useful, अगर मान लीजिए आपको कहा गया है that there is a particular asset and that asset can produce 3 lakh units. ठीक है, 3 लाख यूनिट्स प्रोड्यूस कर सकती है. दैट इज द कैपेसिटी ऑफ द असेट. सो अगर मैंने 20,000 यूनिट्स प्रोड्यूस कर लिया इस साल में, सो अकॉर्डिंगली आई शुड डेप्रिशिएट द असेट. सपोज द कॉस्ट ऑफ असेट इज 10 लाख, राइट, एंड इट इज एबल टू प्रोड्यूस 2 लाख यूनिट्स throughout its lifespan, and this year I have produced 20,000 units. ठीक है, 20,000 यूनिट्स मैंने प्रोड्यूस कर ली. सो डोंट यू थिंक दैट आई शुड डेप्रिशिएट इट अकॉर्डिंगली, क्योंकि उतना वैल्यू तो मैंने यूज कर ही लिया है. Yudhishthir, I didn't get your question. What you are trying to ask? Formula of rate of depreciation in WDV? Just please specify a bit. So in this particular method, depreciation will be higher in the year in which you will be producing more number of units. ठीक है, जब आप ज्यादा units produce करोगे तब आपका depreciation भी ज्यादा होगा. Let us see that Cutler Energy has discovered that 10 lakh barrels of proved reserve production during the year was 25,000 barrels. ठीक है, और आपकी कॉस्ट कितनी है? 84 करोड़. So 84 crores, what is the total capacity you are having multiplied by what is the capacity you have utilized during the year, and this will be your depreciation charge. ठीक है, fine. So this is your units of production related thing. Next, you have changes in the existing decommissioning, restoration or other liabilities. Fine. I cannot recall any kind of formula. Basically, in case of your WDV method, whatever your cost is, you have to charge a percentage onto it, and that is your depreciation. I guess you might be referring to something else. ठीक है, because I'm not able to recall any such kind of formula. Fine. This PDF is already uploaded in the course actually. So, this is just a revision class which I am taking, and the PDF is already uploaded in the course. Changes in the existing decommissioning, restoration or any other kind of liability. देखो, यहाँ पे आपको एक चीज ध्यान में रखने की जरूरत है, which is, just a second. Yes, this particular portion. Impairment part. So to determine whether an item of property, plant or equipment is impaired, an enterprise applies AS 28, that is impairment of asset. AS 28 explains that how an enterprise reviews the carrying amount, how it determines the recoverable amount, and the difference is your impairment loss. I have already told you what is the carrying amount of your asset. Okay, what is the book value of your asset? But still I would like to look at the formula which you might be referring. I'll Google it. ठीक है, एंड फिर अगर मुझे कुछ पता चला तो आई विल जस्ट लेट यू नो. बट एज पर मी आई डोंट थिंक सो कि ऐसा कुछ है फॉर्मूला डायरेक्टली अकाउंटिंग में तो नहीं है, बट फॉर कैलकुलेशन पर्पसेस मे बी there might be something like that. I'm not denying it, but I'm not aware of it. Let's see this AS28, how it determines the recoverable amount of assets. So first of all, you have to know the carrying value. Next thing you have to know the recoverable amount of asset. Recoverable मतलब कि आपका market value क्या है, fair value क्या है, what is the value that you can recover. In this particular case, you have to deduct any kind of expenses which you have. Suppose अगर मुझे ये pen market में बेचना है and this pen can fetch me 50 rupees, fine, and I have to incur 5 rupees in order to sell this particular pen, so 45 rupees will be the net recoverable amount. And finally, carrying amount less the recoverable amount will give me my impairment loss. ठीक है, वो मुझे मेरा impairment loss दे देगा. Now retirements, ये चीज इसमें आपको ये याद रखना है, item of PPE retired from active use and held for disposal should be stated at lower of their carrying or NRV net realizable value. ठीक है, इस वैल्यू पे आपको जो आपके retired assets हैं वो represent करने पड़ेंगे. For example, I had a machinery and I no longer use it, right? It is with me still, but I am trying to sell it. ठीक है, मैं इसको बेचना चाहती हूँ. It is not in active use, so it is retired. So किस value पे I should account it for? It should be accounted it for at the carrying amount or net realizable value. ठीक है, या तो NRV या फिर net what you can say carrying amount. Carrying amount का मतलब क्या होता है? Book value, right? What is the value of machinery in your books? आप किस वैल्यू पे मशीनरी को कैरी कर रहे हैं, लेस योर नेट रियलाइजेबल वैल्यू. एंड एनी राइट डाउन शुड बी रिकॉग्नाइज्ड इमीडिएटली, क्योंकि अगर मान लीजिए बुक वैल्यू इज 10,000 एंड मार्केट वैल्यू इज 7,000, सो व्हाट एवर इज द डिफरेंस, जो भी डिफरेंस है 3K का, वो आपका सीधा P&L में जाएगा. नाउ व्हाट इज द डिफरेंस बिटवीन द रिटायरमेंट्स एज वेल एज योर impairment, right? Impairment is with respect to such kind of asset which I'm still using in my production process, right? That is in my active use. Whereas retirements का मतलब है this is that kind of asset which I'm no longer using into my production process. मैं अब use नहीं कर रही हूँ, fine? And I'm keeping it just for the purpose of sale. Now accounting standard 11. अकाउंटिंग स्टैंडर्ड 11 में बहुत सारी चीजें हैं, बट कुछ चीजें हम बहुत ही शॉर्ट वे में समझने की कोशिश करते हैं. नंबर वन थिंग, we have a difference between the monetary assets and the non monetary assets. Monetary assets का मतलब क्या? Any kind of asset which can be represented only in terms of money. For example, I have certain debtors, I have certain creditors, right? So these are my monetary assets. क्योंकि debtors और creditors का मतलब क्या? I have to recover the amount from them. मुझे उनसे पैसे recover करने हैं. Whereas non monetary assets क्या? For example, your land, for example, your building, such kind of things. ठीक है, ये आपकी non monetary assets हुई. Now usually what they have said कि जब भी आप forex transaction में enter कर रहे हो, you should recognize the transaction as on the date of transaction. अब अगर मान लीजिए I have purchased the building in Dubai, right? I have purchased the building in Dubai. So the date of transaction is 10th February. 10th February. So now I will record the transaction at the exchange rate which is given on the transaction date. Transaction date वाली ही exchange rate पे recognize करूंगी क्योंकि उसी दिन तो transaction हुआ है. Now let's come to 31st March. 31st March is my closing date, is my balance sheet date. अब उस दिन there will be a difference between the non-monetary assets and monetary assets. Non-monetary assets, for example, my land, building, any kinds of fixed asset, will be recorded at the same value when they were recorded at the value which was recorded on the date of transaction. ठीक है, ट्रांजैक्शन डे पे जिस वैल्यू पे मैंने बिल्डिंग परचेज की थी उसी वैल्यू पे बैलेंस शीट डेट पे भी रहेगी, no change at all. But when I'm talking about monetary transactions, for example, any kind of payables, any kind of loans, any kind of trade creditors, any kind of debtors, right? Such kind of things, I have to revalue them onto the exchange rate of बैलेंस शीट डेट. ठीक है, क्लोजिंग रेट क्या है, हम उसको क्या बोलते हैं, क्लोजिंग रेट. दैट मीन्स ऑन 31st मार्च व्हाट इज द एक्सचेंज रेट, एंड वी हैव टू सी कि अब डिफरेंस क्या आ रहा है. फॉर एग्जाम्पल, सपोज on 10th February I took a loan. ठीक है, मैंने एक लोन लिया एंड उस दिन एक्सचेंज रेट थी $1 is equal to 47 rupees. ठीक है, great. I recognized my loan at 47 rupees. But now on 31st March, exchange rate has changed to 49. So now I have to revalue it. मुझे इसको revalue करना पड़ेगा. क्यों revalue करना पड़ेगा? Because understand that monetary items, they need सेटलमेंट इन टर्म्स ऑफ मनी. ये लोन कभी ना कभी तो रीपे करना पड़ेगा ना. आई हैव टू रीपे दिस पर्टिकुलर लोन. सो if the exchange rate has changed to 49 and it is my loss, ठीक है, अब मुझे 2 रुपए ज्यादा देने पड़ेंगे. So I have to recognize that loss in the P&L account. Whereas when I talk about land, building, any kind of permanent asset, building तो मेरी पड़ी रहेगी, इस साल भी रहेगी, अगले साल भी रहेगी, आगे आने वाले साल भी रहेगी, right? So that is why I do not change its valuation on closing date, whereas monetary items का valuation को change किया जाता है on closing date, right? That is one thing. Then there is a difference of what you can say, there's a confusion that comes in case of your integral operations and non-integral operations. उसमें भी बहुत ज़्यादा confusion होता है. So let us see that. Just a second. So फॉरेन करेंसी ट्रांजैक्शंस का इनिशियल रिकॉग्निशन किस पे होगा? इनिशियल रिकॉग्निशन मतलब ऑन द डेट ऑफ ट्रांजैक्शन. क्या किस पे हम रिकॉर्ड करेंगे? बाइंग और सेलिंग ऑफ गुड्स एंड सर्विसेज, बोरोइंग और लेंडिंग फंड्स, राइट? Business entity is one of the parties to the forex contract, purchasing or disposing of assets. These are all the transaction. ठीक है, तो on initial recognition, foreign currency transaction must be recorded in the reporting currency, and foreign currency transactions, they are recorded by applying the foreign exchange rate between the reporting currency and foreign currency. This exchange rate is the prevailing rate on the date of transaction. Transaction की date पे what is the exchange rate? Because if I am entering into a transaction on 10th of February, तो उसी date की transaction rate लूंगी. Clear? This is our initial recognition. Now what happens on to the balance sheet date? Balance sheet date पे क्या होता है? So now there is a difference comes between the monetary items and non-monetary items. Monetary items क्या? जैसे कि आपका cash, receivables, payables, right? So in this particular case, what you have to do, it must be reported at an amount that is expected to be received from or required to be paid on the balance sheet date. मतलब कि monetary items के case में what is the exchange rate that we'll be using? This will be exchange rate as on the balance sheet date. Balance sheet date की exchange rate रहेगी. Whereas in case of non-monetary items कैसे होते हैं? Like your fixed asset, inventories, investments, right? So we are not going to change it because we know that this is going to remain with us as long as we can see the future. Right now there is no condition that we have to dispose them, और हमने इनको लंबे समय के लिए लिया है. So they will be recorded in the on the transaction date rate itself. ठीक है, जो भी ट्रांजैक्शन डेट की रेट थी उसी रेट पे हम इसको रिकॉग्नाइज करेंगे. देयर विल बी नो चेंज on the balance sheet date. But why do we change the monetary items? Why do we change the valuation of the loans which I have taken? Because I have to repay it. मुझे repay करना पड़ेगा, and there is a concept of conservatism and it says that if you can foresee a loss, please recognize it. तो अगर मुझे दिख रहा है आंखों के सामने नुकसान की now the exchange rate has increased or decreased or whatever has happened, I have to recognize it, right? मुझे उसको identity देनी पड़ेगी. Now after that, foreign operations. So integral foreign operations and non-integral foreign operations, इसमें भी बहुत confusion होता है. So what is integral foreign operation? बहुत ही आसान सी भाषा में, a cloth merchant in India is also selling in Dubai. मतलब कि आपकी ब्रांच ही है, ठीक है, आपकी ब्रांच ही है. फॉर एग्जाम्पल जैसे कि आप माने you are selling handbags in India and the same kind of store you are having in London as well, ठीक है, तो आपका बिजनेस सेम ही तो हो गया. Now tell me, integral foreign operation का मतलब क्या हुआ? This is just one business which is having its branches in foreign as well. So that is what we are calling as the integral foreign operations, ठीक है. Integral foreign operations के केस में क्या होगा? Whatever principles I am applying onto my branch which is in India, the same principles I'll apply to the branch which is in foreign country as well. जैसे कि मान लीजिए I am converting my monetary items on the closing rate, ठीक है, on the balance sheet date I am converting it into the closing rate. So same kind of thing I'll be doing with the London branch accounts as well. So at the end of the day मुझे consolidated version represent करना है, right? मुझे consolidated version को represent करना है. So that is what they are saying. So integral का मतलब you have to treat that these operations are just an extension of your entity and whatever principles you are applying for yourself you have to apply onto the integral business as well, ठीक है. So exchange rate, we will see individual monetary items, not the net investment. मतलब कि मैं हर आइटम को देखूंगी. For example, see this, या ऐसे समझ में आ जाएगा. This is my cloth business in India and this is my cloth business in UK. Fine. So over here I have non-monetary items एंड मॉनेटरी आइटम्स. नॉन मॉनेटरी आइटम्स को मैं किस पे रिकॉग्नाइज करती हूँ? ट्रांजैक्शन डेट पे. फाइन. मॉनेटरी आइटम्स को मैं किस पे रिकॉग्नाइज करती हूँ? बैलेंस शीट रेट पे. फाइन. और क्लोजिंग रेट. सो सेम काइंड ऑफ प्रिंसिपल आई विल अप्लाई ओवर हियर एज वेल. एवरी आइटम विल बी इंडिविजुअली मेजर्ड. हर आइटम को इंडिविजुअली मेजर किया जाएगा एंड देन आई विल रिप्रेजेंट अ कंसोलिडेटेड वर्जन because both the kind of businesses, दोनों cloth के ही business हैं and I am just having a branch in UK. Whereas when I talk about the non-integral business, non-integral business का मतलब क्या? इंडिया में तो मैं cloth बेच रही हूँ, ठीक है, और यूके में हैंडबैग्स, ठीक है. सो डोंट यू थिंक दिस इज जस्ट अ सेपरेट काइंड ऑफ वर्टिकल आई एम हैविंग? एकदम ही बिल्कुल ही अलग हो गया, ठीक है. यहाँ क्लॉथ है, वहां पे हैंडबैग है, तो अब क्या करना है? हर आइटम को इंडिविजुअली नहीं देखूंगी. हर आइटम को आई विल नॉट सी इंडिविजुअली. आई विल जस्ट सी दैट व्हाट इज द इन्वेस्टमेंट आई हैव मेड इन दिस बिजनेस. टोटल इन्वेस्टमेंट क्या है मेरा, टोटल पैसे क्या है. सो दिस इज व्हाट नॉन इंटीग्रल बिजनेस ऑपरेशन इज. जैसे कि इसका एक एग्जांपल ये है, एबीसी लिमिटेड इज हैविंग जेम्स एंड ज्वेलरी बिजनेस इन इंडिया एंड डिजाइनर बैग्स बिजनेस इन लंदन, ठीक है. तो दोनों बिजनेस बिल्कुल अलग अलग हैं, है एक ही एंटिटी के. बोथ द बिजनेस दे बिलोंग टू द सेम एंटिटी बट दे आर कंप्लीटली ऑपोजिट इन नेचर. सो दैट इज व्हाई you are not going to value each and every item. No, आप net investment देखोगे कि भैया total पैसा कितना लगा है ये बताओ इसमें, right? So that is why over here exchange rate changes will impact the net investment, not the individual monetary or non-monetary items. Fine. So this is what your integral as well as the non-integral business operations. Just a second. Yeah. So this was AS 11. नाउ नेक्स्ट थिंग इज AS13. AS13 में बहुत ही थोड़ा सा पार्ट है विच वी हैव टू डू. लॉन्ग टर्म इन्वेस्टमेंट्स एज वेल एज दी करंट इन्वेस्टमेंट. सो लॉन्ग टर्म इन्वेस्टमेंट्स को किस तरीके से वैल्यू करेंगे? सो दे आर द इन्वेस्टमेंट्स अदर देन द करंट इन्वेस्टमेंट्स एंड दे आर हैविंग अ लॉन्ग टर्म मैच्योरिटी. करंट इन्वेस्टमेंट्स कौन से हैं? विच आर इंटेंडेड टू बी केप्ट फॉर अ पीरियड ऑफ लेस देन एन ईयर. कॉस्ट ऑफ इन्वेस्टमेंट में आपका क्या आएगा? बेसिक कॉस्ट एंड एनी अदर काइंड ऑफ एक्विजिशन चार्जेस दैट यू माइट हैव पेड. Income from investments, interest, dividend, and any kind of rentals that you have received from such investments will be treated as your income, because obviously this is our asset. Now, what is the carrying amount of such investments? किस amount पे आप carry करोगे? So, current investments needs to be carried at lower of cost or the fair value, दोनों में से जो भी कम हो, and long-term investments has to be valued at cost. But if there is any kind of permanent decline, सो यू नीड टू मेक अ प्रोविजन फॉर डिमिनिशन. मतलब अगर परमानेंट डिक्लाइन है तब आपको फिर वैल्यू कम करनी पड़ेगी. दैट इज वन थिंग. इन केस ऑफ लॉन्ग टर्म इन्वेस्टमेंट्स वैल्यू कैसे करना है? करंट इन्वेस्टमेंट्स यू कैन डू इंडिविजुअल इन्वेस्टमेंट बेसिस एंड ओवरऑल बेसिस, दोनों केसेस में कर सकते हो. क्या वैल्यूएशन? बेसिस ऑफ वैल्यूएशन का मतलब ये है ईच इन्वेस्टमेंट. फॉर एग्जांपल आई हैव मेड 3 शॉर्ट टर्म इन्वेस्टमेंट्स, सो मैं अलग अलग भी वैल्यू कर सकती हूँ एंड आई कैन राइट अ एग्रीगेट वैल्यू एज वेल. बट इन केस ऑफ लॉन्ग टर्म इन्वेस्टमेंट्स you have to write each investment individually. For example, 15% shares, 20% shares, they both will be written separately. And in case of current investments, you can club them. अगर एक ही टाइप के हैं like shares हैं तो आप उनको साथ में club कर सकते हैं. Now next we have the disposal. When any investment is sold, the difference between the carrying amount and net sale proceeds should be charged or the credited to the P&L account. Obviously, disposal में आपको अगर profit हो रहा है या loss हो रहा है, that you have to show, right? Now, question. Okay. See, what happens is, कई बार क्या होता है ना, you can take a particular asset एंड उसके एक्सचेंज में आप दूसरी असेट ले सकते हैं. ठीक है, मतलब कि यहाँ पे कैश का ट्रांजैक्शन नहीं हो रहा है. कैश का ट्रांजैक्शन नहीं हो रहा है. सो इन दिस पर्टिकुलर केस व्हाट विल हैपन? यू हैव टू रिकॉग्नाइज द असेट. अब किस वैल्यू पे आप रिकॉग्नाइज करोगे? सो जनरली द प्रिंसिपल सेज दैट यू शुड रिकॉर्ड द ट्रांजैक्शन एट द वैल्यू विच यू कैन मेजर मोर प्रिसाइजली. तो आप क्या ज्यादा प्रिसाइजली मेजर कर सकते हो? the asset, the fair value of the asset that you have got or the value of the asset which you have given up. क्या आप ज्यादा अच्छे से मेजर कर सकते हो? So you have got all the options. अगर आपने जो asset give up की है, if you can measure it reliably, so that is the first preference you have. अगर मान लीजिए मैंने अपनी एक मशीनरी दी है और उसके बदले में मैंने फर्नीचर लिया है, सो नाउ आई हैव टू रिकॉर्ड दिस ट्रांजैक्शन. एंट्री क्या होगी बुक्स में? फर्नीचर विल बी डेबिटेड and machinery will be credited. That is going to be the entry. Now the question comes कि किस वैल्यू पे करूं मैं ये. ठीक है, किस वैल्यू पे करूं? So basically जो चीज मेरे पास रही है, I know its value more precisely. Yes or no? ठीक है, या तो आपका ऑलरेडी वैल्यू डिसाइडेड था. Number 1 preference. Number 2, if the value was not decided, then number 2 is what you have given up. आपके पास से क्या गया है? I know that the machinery I have given up has the value of 50,000. So आप 50,000 पे रिकॉर्ड करोगे, right? And if suppose you are not sure about this particular machinery's value and you know that what is the fair value of the furniture. ठीक है, आपको नहीं पता है कि इसको आप सही से रिकॉर्ड, मतलब आप यू डोंट हैव एन एस्टिमेट फॉर दिस इन क्वेश्चन एंड यू नो दैट फेयर वैल्यू ऑफ द फर्नीचर इज 60,000, सो यू कैन रिकॉर्ड इट एट 60,000. यू हैव गॉट ऑल द ऑप्शंस बट देयर इज एन ऑर्डर ऑफ प्रेफरेंस. पहली बात, इफ यू हैव एन एग्रीमेंट फॉर इट, गो विद द एग्रीमेंट. If you don't have, then find out the value of the asset which you have given up, उस पे record कीजिए. If you don't even have that, then finally you can record it at the fair value of the asset which you have acquired as well. Fine. So this is the thing. Now time is up.